Yeah, hello everybody. You are in the right place, but we're still waiting for some attendees to settle in. Um, get this going in a couple of minutes.
Okay, Uwe, I think it's fine.
Yeah, okay. Okay, here we go. Good evening from Hong Kong, and good afternoon to anyone west of here, in Europe in particular, and of course, good morning to New York and places even further west from our location. We have the great pleasure of having Paul Scanlan, the Huawei CTO, speaking to us tonight at this fourth webinar that Asia Times has conducted on topics that we believe to be of eminent interest to everybody. We have also the pleasure, the great pleasure, that Paul is an old friend and not just somebody we recently met. Paul is also a very good guitarist, and it's that kind of capability of his that we have often enjoyed in various places, whether in Hong Kong or in Shenzhen across the border. The actual background for Paul in terms of where he's from and what he's doing at Huawei, he can probably tell you a little bit himself. He is originally from, and I guess is an Australian national, and has worked with Huawei for the better part of 10 years. In other words, during the period when Huawei really came into its own, it became a Fortune 500 company on the strength of about 22 billion in income, in revenues about 10 years ago. It's in 2019 grown into a company with reportedly 121 billion US dollars, so a massive increase. And I do not have the latest figure. Maybe Paul can fit, that in. Huawei is, of course, known as a telecoms company, as a technology company, but it does not only make telecommunications equipment or handsets, it also is in various other areas, in particular involved in applications of artificial intelligence. It is involved in robotics. It's involved in, well, all the type of technologies really that will define the ongoing, what some people have called fourth industrial revolution. I guess one of the biggest brand builders of Huawei has been US President Donald Trump, who has somehow taken it into his mind that this is a company that provides the kind of competition that the United States would rather not have to deal with, but actually try to shut out. And that, of course, has made Huawei famous globally over the last 3 years as a key element of the China-US trade war and over a broader spectrum, the technology wars that are raging globally. Huawei makes handsets and actually last year outproduced and outsold Apple for the first time, and is still second, however, to the Korean giant Samsung. And we'll see how that particular race comes out. Keep in mind, those of you who are not aware of it, today was, or rather Monday, midnight US time, was a very important deadline when actually the US sanctions against any sales of chips by any companies using US equipment came into effect. So we are speaking on the day after this momentous event. And that leads me really to the first question, Paul. David will, of course, David Goldman, our deputy editor of Asia Times for Business, will chime in as well. But the first question, Paul, is this. How debilitating is this now that you've been, for example, shut off from TSMC, which is one of the biggest chip makers and chip makers whose products you've been using?
Mm-hmm. Well, thanks again, Uwe, and thanks also David and all the team for inviting me here. You're right, I've seen a lot of changes in 12 years in Huawei, yes. In fact, it was a lot less than 22 billion when I started. So I guess the best way to answer it is really just to paraphrase what our board members have been saying, that Huawei will survive. If we go back to our core values, that I've rather sort of started with some other different questions, but just take some of our core values. Our core values are all built around integrity, dedication, and perseverance. We have a diverse portfolio of products, a diverse supply chain. We've got thousands of customers. In 30 years, Uwe, people have trusted Huawei. Okay, you don't make $122 billion by accident. Yeah, they believe in Huawei. They love Huawei. They love the brand. They trust us. So the road to get to $120 billion isn't easy. There's challenges every day. There's obstacles everywhere. Okay, everywhere in R&D, in sales, in marketing. Okay, but we do have, as you just mentioned, a very robust product portfolio, patent portfolio, 5G, AI, and cloud solutions. And we're focusing on not just the components, but also we're focusing on how the technologies will transform industries. And that requires collaboration, that requires partnerships. It's not about doing things independently. But I think what's unfortunate, probably what's more important, is that this ban will really damage, I guess, the US's long-standing credibility as a global leader. History has shown that, openness and competition, global trade, collaboration, that drives innovation. And that in turn drives progress. And that's really at the heart of Huawei. We spend, $20+ billion every year on R&D. That's about innovation, and that's about focus on customers. Deliver a business result for the customers, not for yourself.
Paul, if I may, President Trump has called you spyware and accused Huawei of trying to steal data from the United States and other countries and claimed that your networks are insecure. Obviously, I don't expect you to respond to that directly, but I've got a question in your capacity as Chief Technology Officer. Is it technologically possible to put this issue to rest? In other words, if you were to sit down in a room with the best information security people in the United States and Europe and other countries and say, here are a set of tests we can run, here are a set of safeguards we can establish, can we put this question to rest? Is it a soluble problem from a purely technological point of view?
Unfortunately, it's not. And the reason it's not, David, is because of people. Let's take Wi-Fi, Let's take the applications you have today on your handphone. What's the most common Wi-Fi password? Who's responsible for that, you or an expert in the IT?
How did you know my password was Snoopy?
But you get the point. The reason technology isn't the problem. It's about people and it's about process. But let me just give you some examples of what we've been trying to do. First of all, security, it's for the wrong reason that security has been brought up and Huawei brought to the picture. Okay, But it is about time that the whole world started addressing security globally. I think that's probably the right thing to say. And the reason I say it's appropriate is because if you just look at the supply chain in this thing called a telecom network, whether it's a fixed or a mobile network, doesn't really matter. It's a very complicated chain of equipment. It's not from one supplier. And to think that, you know, by removing one supplier from the chain, you're going to have a sense of security through the whole thing, that's not going to happen. You know, I visited the US and I met with some of our customers over there and some of the tier 2, tier 3 customers. You know, they have very sophisticated AI-based algorithms within their networks, just looking for things that are not right, okay? It's all AI-based. So if somebody was trying to steal data or export information, they'll pick it up very quickly. And you know, the problem that the CTO told me, he said, the biggest problem we have is 11. That's 11 people who consistently click on the wrong email and download malware inside my network. And we've got to go and find it. So we have a training program to fix these types of problems. And after 6 months, it comes back again because they go back to their old habits. So you see, the problem is people. What we have been trying to do globally is working with associations like the GSMA, like ETSI, like the 3GPP, bringing together all the vendors and all the operators to try and create a framework. And the framework is audit and certification. So if you want to use technology, you need process and you need governments to bring them all together. Because just like I mentioned at the beginning, it's all about collaboration. One company, one party, one person, one standard isn't going to fix security. Removing one company isn't going to fix security. But if we had globally all governments subscribe to a test and audit and certification program, you could test everything, including the apps on your phone, including the Wi-Fi routers, etc. You know, everything. But today we don't do that. We rely on the expertise of telecom operators. And I must say, having been in the industry for more than 40 years, telecom operators are very sophisticated. You know, they spend billions of dollars in security. But that's why the government trusts them to build telecom networks. And that's why, touch wood, they haven't really been hacked till today.
Well, if I could follow up, Huawei offered to provide patents to American manufacturers so that its equipment could be produced in the United States under license. Would that contribute to the security issue, number one? And secondly, how was that received when the proposal was made?
To the best of my knowledge, answering your question from the end first, I'm not aware that anything was taken up based on that. There have been a few different reports, but I'm not aware personally of anybody engaging us directly to talk about that. But again, you know, it may be probably beyond my pay grade. But to come to the reason, I believe Mr. Wren was quite sincere about making, you know, in 2008 or perhaps around that time, we had already had arrangements with companies like Motorola and licensed 3G technology. So, you know, this sort of OEM style of offer is quite normal and quite reasonable. What would it have done? Well, first of all, it could have given the opportunity to an American company or another company, it didn't have to be an American company, to get a head start using our technology. So that's not a bad reason for making the offer, and would not have been a bad reason for the offer, you know, being accepted. But also it would have given the opportunity for third parties to perhaps investigate more deeply our products, hardware and software, and prove to their satisfaction that there isn't any, you know, backdoors and things like that. So I think that would have addressed
Let me mention to members of the audience, you will find a Q&A button on your Zoom panel. If you have a question, please type it in. We will get to them and try to ask Paul as many of the listener questions as we can after our initial conversation. Sorry, Uwe, do you want to come in?
Yeah, I Paul, just going back to the issue of, you know, how serious this cutoff is. If TSMC or Samsung or somebody else is not going to provide you with the kind of logic chips that you need, And there will be a time, presumably, when you will run out. Do you have enough time to get this thing produced or these things produced in the meantime? I know that that's probably the biggest secret the company has at the moment, and I don't expect you to be very detailed about it. But you get the point, right? I mean, how difficult is it now? What period are you going to go through in which you have to cope with this issue?
Since you've led me the answer is yes, it's very difficult for me to talk about those sorts of things. But look, to people who've been in the industry and understand, let's come back to what I said earlier, which is a very diverse portfolio of products, okay? And diverse supply chain. It's not just about you won't have access to a 7-nanometer chip. I think, Richard Uchendong has already mentioned that will cause challenges. Of course, it will cause challenges. But remember, diversity in products, diversity in supply chain, there are many different ways that you can engineer things and do different types of businesses. So it's not as though, the entire company is reliant on one product or one particular component. And, we didn't think about business continuity management 2 years ago, right? We've been doing this for about 10 or 15 years. So probably the fairest way to answer your question is, we've been working on supply chain management for a long time, and we've been diversifying the portfolio, which includes patents in intellectual property, intrinsic components, material science, a whole range of things, cloud services, AI-based solutions, and as I mentioned, also working along using technologies to transform industry with partners. And that's really what I think people should consider about when they think about Huawei, not just about whether we have access to chip of type A from company type B.
All right, well, following up on that sort of direction of our questions, of course, really, I think Huawei came into the sort of forefront of the global brain when 5G came into existence, and people started thinking about what this is all about. It's not going to be principally even about communications. It's about a whole other slew of things that I think you are probably referring to at this point when you're saying you have a rather large portfolio of technologies to offer, and you are well equipped to actually deal with that. But just give us a bit of an overview of what 5G really is, as opposed to just a faster way of downloading a video.
So you've hit the nail on the head. It's absolutely not really about speed, that's for sure. Okay, I consider 5G to be a platform for transformation. And that's because it offers open, standards-based and a secure framework to do different things. So let's consider the first industry that it's going to provide benefits to, and that's the telecom operators. And what it does specifically to them is it improves their operating point. It basically makes them more efficient. That's what 5G does. And if you think about the other components of 5G, like the other technical capabilities, like low latency and the ability to provide massive connections, then it's really about how those things transform industries. And I'll give you examples. If you want to save 1 billion lives, or you want to reduce 1 billion tons of carbon dioxide, or you want to create $1 trillion of additional GDP, then you need 5G and AI. You need the 5G to be able to connect all the things, which is the IoT bit, and the people. And then you need to collect all the data, and then you need to feed it to an AI-based solution. And that's how you transform industries. That's how you grow the economy. That's how you save the planet, I guess. So, China understands the value of 5G and AI, and that's what it's been investing in for many years. And that's, they can see it quite clearly. That will drive social and also economic benefits.
Well,
so
give us a couple of, yeah, Paul, if you could give us a couple of examples. You and I have talked about this in the past when I interviewed you for my book. You were particularly enthusiastic about healthcare applications,
yes.
linking up digitized health records, real-time vital signs, DNA sequencing in terms of what this could accomplish for diagnostic medicine, telemedicine, and so forth. We'd love to hear about that.
We don't have a lot of time, but I'll try and make it as succinct as I can. Let's take an example of what we've been able to do in a collaborative way. The UK sort of did it at the Excel Centre to some extent, so it wasn't just the construction in a couple of weeks of hospitals in Wuhan. But what we're able to do is by focusing on a target, okay? So the first point is you need the target, okay? You need the target. And the target was, we have a problem in Wuhan, yeah? So we built hospitals, not Huawei, but the country built hospitals within about 2 weeks. Huawei built entire 5G networks in less than 3 days. And within 2 weeks, we had, through collaboration, we had cloud-based AI solutions running, okay? Now, what we did was we used the power of 5G through its connectivity and low latency and large streaming capacity to be able to gather data, to feed it to AI-based algorithms to do what's missing or what's lacking in healthcare, and that's getting expertise, which is limited, to the right place. That's fundamentally what's been done. So if now you think about it, the challenge we have in the healthcare system is getting expertise affordably to the masses. And we need information to help us do those sorts of things, because doctors and experts are in limited supply. So anything you can do, try and bring that down, obviously will improve and save lives. So a couple of very simple, I'll say simple use cases. We've been doing them for some time, but high definition, just as we're doing now, high definition based remote consultation. It's clear, it works. By the way, it wasn't invented today, it wasn't invented yesterday, it was invented several years ago. But only now we can see behavioral change through necessity and through technology will allow both the physicians and also all the ecosystem surrounding that in the healthcare system for patients and doctors to be able to trust that these things can benefit this particular industry. So it's quite clear that high definition video-based consultation will work. Why do I say we need 5G? Let's take an example where we're using 4G. The challenge we have is uplink. So the problem we have is we don't have enough capacity in 4G because of competition for the resources by people playing games or doing video streaming or other things. When we want this essential service called healthcare, it could have been security, it could have been manufacturing, it could have been law enforcement, it could have been other emergency services competing for the same amount of bandwidth. And 5G, as I mentioned at the beginning, open, standards-based, secure, does it better than 4G. So essential services running over 4G, over 5G, will be more secure and can be guaranteed. If you're doing remote patient monitoring, as we were discussing earlier about the COVID in Wuhan and in other countries, you want access to remote data because you can't have the physicians physically next to the infected people. So again, if everything is connected, and that's what 5G does better than the other technologies, then you have the opportunity to start using other upstream technologies to improve or transform those industries. And healthcare is a very good example of one. And 1 billion lives by 2030 is something that's very practical to be able to do with 5G and cloud-based AI solutions.
Paul, let me follow up on one element of that. There is by the application of 5G in telecommunications and other fields, very, very substantial energy savings. You have highlighted to us in discussion before. So could you explain that a little bit and see what kind of energy applications actually are possible?
Yeah. I think a couple of years ago when I first did the study, or when we commissioned the study to be done, the two most important things that I found from 5G were that if you have growth, and there's growth in data services in every country, but more than about 25 to 30%, bottom line is 5G is cheaper than 4G or anything before that or any other technology. And you might think, well, that doesn't seem to make sense. Doesn't this new technology cost more? Well, yeah, the CapEx might be slightly higher, but it's an operational problem. It's an OpEx problem. And remember, if you have growth and the cost to service the growth, then that needs to be done as efficiently as possible. So if now if you take 5G, some people say, but the 5G piece of equipment, it consumes more electricity. It consumes 1.2 kilowatts, and the 4G one is only 1 kilowatt. And I said, yes, you see, it's consuming less power. That doesn't make sense. 1.2 is bigger than 1. Well, no, it isn't, because the 5G one has 20 times more capacity. So it's very efficient. It's more efficient by capacity. It's more efficient by spectrum. It's more efficient by bit per user, or however you want to consider it. So if you now do some projections on how to build and scale out telecom networks, just to service the demand that we see today, which is consumer, not all the industry stuff, and not all the downstream components of industry, which will benefit, then building 4G or any other network, using any other network technology, will double the carbon footprint from about 300 million tons over 5 years to about almost 700 million tons. But if you use 5G, it will increase for about the next 12 months, and then it will start to come down. So you save the planet by using 5G. If we follow those sorts of examples through in each of the other industries, then you get downstream effects. Let's talk about renewable energy sources. Let's just talk about on or offshore wind farms and also solar farms. Using 5G will allow you to improve predictive maintenance very specifically in wind farms. But Uwe, the challenge is today the base station is standing here and it's pointing at the people, but the wind farms are over there. And by the way, the manufacturing facilities are over here. So, and the hospitals are over there. You get my point. Today, the telecom operators are focused very much on 5G as an improvement over 4G for their own business, as reducing churn to provide better customer experience. But if we want to transform hospitals, you need consistent 5G coverage in the hospitals, in the medical centres, along the roads to service the connected ambulances. If you want to transform manufacturing, you need 5G in the manufacturing plants. You need them in the wind farms. You need them at the solar farms. So you need a little bit of a mindset change, and you need the right sort of collaboration. You need the right sort of targets or SLAs to be able to improve in all of these.
Let's speaking practically. China hopes to have its national 5G network pretty much built out by the end of 2021, which would certainly be well in advance of anyone else. What kind of changes can we expect in the Chinese economy on a practical level over what kind of time frame? Things like manufacturing, smart cities, other things which, of course, you can read about in detail on Huawei's website and indeed in many other places. It seemed a bit of science fiction, but
yes.
If the 5G network is there, when will we see substantial changes in ordinary life?
Yeah, I'm 100% certain, David, and let me explain why. I can remember when I first was coming to China, perhaps 10 or 12 years ago, and even when I came to China and spent a lot more time here, just in the last 7 years, I've seen a huge amount of change. I can still remember the first time that I was in New York, I think 4 years ago, and I said, I'm living in a city where most of the buses are electric, most of the taxis are electric. We use our mobile phone for everything. We don't have cash or credit cards. And I can remember one of the reporters saying, I was waiting there, Paul, to say, where does he live? From New York, San Francisco, London? Where does he live? Which city? And I said, it's in Shenzhen, China. In that few years, I have seen traffic go from chaos to organized. I've seen people's behaviors change, the way they cross the streets. I've seen competition in every sector, in delivery, transportation, logistics. Just now I've mentioned how transformative the COVID experience has been in both healthcare and education. Yes. So I believe that as 5G is being built out more, it's not just transforming people's lives in having faster downloads and being able to do more on your hand phone, but those industry sectors that I mentioned, they will be transformed. And the reason I'm confident is because you can see it today in just about every country in the world. Behavioral changes. People understand that they can work from home. We can collaborate online. We can study from home. We can take remote engagements with doctors and physicians and things like that. All those things are normal. People accept them. So that means that the business model is clear. If the business model is clear, people invest. It's as clear as that. So China, as I mentioned, spending tens to hundreds of billions of dollars over the last 5 or 6 years in the sector you mentioned, in semiconductors, but in AI and 5G through Huawei as examples, and the other companies like Alibaba, Tencent, etc., then absolutely you're going to see huge amounts of change and benefits in both social and economic areas in this country.
Well, let's talk for a moment about Huawei, the company. So not what 5G can do or what Huawei's products can do, but Huawei, the company. There are a lot of interesting elements. I believe you have approximately 200,000 employees globally. Is that roughly correct?
Yes. About 100.
Yeah, and something like a quarter or so of that number are actually foreigners, are non-Chinese employees. Okay, so the first question is, how does this actually fit together? I mean, how do you make a company out of that? I have lived in Hong Kong since 2003, and some of the cultural differences between Chinese and Westerners are not that easy to bridge, even in a city like Hong Kong. And in mainland China, I would assume that this is not going to be any easier. A follow-up question to that would then be, in terms of the enormous number of, that you mentioned of up to 20 billion or so a year of research, where is most of that research conducted? In China, abroad? Can you give us some kind of idea of the percentages?
Sure. Got it. Okay, so I guess the biggest challenge in any large company is HR, right? It's the acquisition and the retention and then the utilization of talent. Yep. So yes, you're right. We probably have 40-ish thousand foreigners in the company. Why do we need that? We're a global company. We operate in 170 countries, 172 countries. It's not about the language or the translation of the language. It's about understanding a culture. What we've learned is if you want to do business in many countries, you need to understand the culture. And that's why you localize. So different countries, we have higher localization rates. It's a challenge. Let's come back down to Huawei's, one of Huawei's key, the vision statement of the company, key core values. One is called dedication, yes? Not every foreigner wants to work till midnight or on Saturday and Sunday every single day, if you understand my meaning. That can be a challenge because of the corporate culture towards dedication. And that's seen differently by Westerners and by my Chinese colleagues. So we do have an HR challenge. The problem in every country is talent. And the biggest problem is people. It's not about R&D or inventing anything. That's actually easy. It's not about delivering anything. That's actually easy. It's about managing people. So it's a challenge in Huawei. You've got to pay attention to it. We have a lot of programs in every country where foreigners who are making it or are a bit more successful are trying to teach and counsel and mentor the locals in other countries to try to explain the cultural values of the company, the core values of the company, why Mr. Ren and the board talk in certain ways, why we do certain things, how did we become successful. it's a very systematic program we have. There's a lot of perseverance to try and get it right. I won't say we succeed better necessarily than any other company, but we, largely the retention is pretty good, and the talent we have is very good. So coming to your second question about the R&D, we tend to do a lot of research outside China. So we use foreign talent, local talent in different countries, in the US, in Silicon Valley, in Canada, in Russia, in Italy, in Sweden, in Germany, yes, also France, and also in India, yeah. But we don't tend to do development there. We tend to do the development in China. So at last count, there are about 17 research facilities around the world. There could be more, but I'm not aware of them all. But we try, sometimes they're collaborative. Often we collaborate with our customers. So this is joint innovation centers. We get ideas. The concept of R&D in Huawei isn't about, one group of people just focusing on something here. R&D in Huawei is about, let's start with the customer. Customer has requirements. Okay, let's bring that in. Now we have intrinsic research, material science, algorithmic stuff. Then you have the guys who are trying to do, I'll say, the normal research bit. And then you have the guys who are trying to improve the product. That's R&D in Huawei, and that needs different types of talents, and a lot of it is distributed around the world. And we do focus on certain places where there seems to be a concentration of a certain type of talent for historical reasons. And that's how Huawei does its R&D.
Well, if I could follow up, in terms of Huawei's competitive position in the world landscape, typically people think of your competitors as companies like Ericsson and Nokia. But in many of the applications, for example, artificial intelligence, you have formidable competitors in China. Last year, you introduced an AI chip for servers, the Ascend series. Baidu yesterday just announced that it had developed a chip. Alibaba and many other Chinese companies, and of course, many startups are involved there. So how do you see your most important competition, both particularly internally in China with respect to other Chinese companies?
Yeah. Look, I think it's well known, right? Necessity is the mother of invention, and competition drives innovation. Yeah. So keep those two things in your head. If I just perhaps relay to your audience a little bit about Huawei, we have internal competition. Marketing departments competing with each other to come up with the best marketing campaigns or the best, go-to-market strategies, etc. And we have the product, the R&D guys trying to, outbuild and out-innovate the other groups. We have another departments trying to, post more patents than this here. You've got salespeople competing against this and everything. That's all done within Huawei. That's all done within China. Yes. Perhaps it's a little bit more aggressive. Perhaps we pay a bit more attention to it, or we give the opportunity. The company gives the opportunity to say, if we have this sort of fever within our company, then perhaps it'll bring out the best or bring out better results. You need to balance it carefully, because if you have the wrong KPIs, then you drive the wrong behavior. But remember, the components of Huawei's core values always started with, the first one is integrity and perseverance built around dedication towards customers. So everything's always about the customer. And I can remember hearing a story about Mr. Ren giving a product back to an R&D person or team, I don't know which, as their bonus, and this was the product that nobody bought. So it's not about inventing things that nobody wants to use or designing a product that nobody wants to buy. So you have to always keep in mind, coming back to what's the target, what's the reason. But also remember, there's a lot of space in this thing called AI. So there's a lot of room to move, both in the, I'll say the chips that can do a lot of the processing, but also in the application. Remember, if you can get access to data, and then the AI algorithms can start to learn based on some of they'll say the teachings that you're giving it, then it's what comes on top of that that's really where the opportunities are. If you want an AI system to be able to recognize all the TB in a million X-rays. You've got to train it properly, otherwise it's going to make mistakes. If you're going to do things very, very quickly, you're going to start trusting it. So there is a lot of space in this thing called AI, and some chips will be better suited perhaps to those components relating to training, and there'll be others that'll be better suited perhaps to, I'll say, the more computational components of AI. So competition, essential for innovation, okay? Essential for innovation. And I mentioned at the beginning also that China, and I guess the whole world understands the value of AI. But I think China can see that if we can have enough data and we have enough people competing and trying things in different ways. Remember, in Chinese, it's sort of, a bit like this, you're going left, Paul. No, I'm going right, but I'm coming back to go left. It's about trying things in many different ways rather than being brutal and saying, we're going to just do it this way, just do it this way, just do it this way. That's also not in the Chinese and certainly not in the way Huawei behaves.
I'm going to sneak in a question from Andrew Salmon, Asia Times distinguished Korean correspondent, who says that as tensions rise between the United States and parts of the rest of the world and China, Huawei is very much identified with China as China's exemplary company. That's a branding issue for Huawei. Is that an advantage or a disadvantage from a branding standpoint? He'd like to know.
Yeah, I think all publicity is good publicity, personal opinion. But perhaps what we were a great, I just explained to you, we spend more than 20 billion on R&D. We're a great R&D company, technology, innovator, developer, executor. And we're a very good sales company, I guess, we can make $122 billion. But marketing, are we a good marketing company? I would think that's where we could have improved a lot. And I think if, to come and try and answer your colleague's question, perhaps we could have done things in a slightly different way, perhaps. Perhaps we could have been more engaging with media in a different way, or with governments in a different way. Because I think the reason Huawei is misunderstood is because you fear us. You don't understand this company. It's a private company. They can't possibly be. How can you make $120 billion being private? You can't possibly have all those patents. You must have stolen this, or you must have done that. You can't possibly, well, you don't have to believe Paul or Huawei. Go and talk to the customers. You don't make 30+% market share globally by doing things the wrong way. So we learn about things. And one of the things that I guess this whole episode has taught us is that we need to understand brand value. And it's different in consumer to corporates. But you have to remember that people who are in corporate are also consumers. You understand the B2C and the B2B2C, right? So has it been a good thing? Well, I guess our brand market has gone from about 80% recognition before this 2 years ago to at least 100%, I think going more than that. But unfortunately, there's a lot of misinformation, and that's really unfortunate, because if we had the opportunity to state the case openly and fairly without everybody saying, you must have done this, you've been doing that, you've been, there's no point even addressing those sorts of comments, yes? From a brand perspective, I think it's been good, because we've been continuously hammered, and for the last 2 to 3 years, we've stuck to the facts and we've stuck to the truth. And I think the people globally are understanding that there isn't necessarily all these things to fear about the company, and that it is bullying tactics by the administrations.
Well, I have a question from somebody in Canada, which is sort of a technical nature, and it's something I've been hearing, but it's never been really I think definitively answered. But is there in terms of 5G, are there software solutions? In other words, is it possible for people to look at more sophisticated software in order to substitute for the kind of hardware advances that Huawei has made and is relying upon.
That would be the ORAN approach, presumably.
Right.
Yes, yes. Okay. Yeah, let me talk a little bit about ORAN. We've investigated ORAN. We think it's quite difficult to do, and I think you've seen reports also from some of our I'll call them colleagues in our competitors who've given different statements about their opinions of ORAN. So the first thing is this concept of what Huawei terms softcom, so sort of decoupling of hardware and software, is not something that's new. And certainly the 3GPP is moving in that direction in any case, the standards bodies. But to think that that you could create a new product, or like an ORAN-based product, very quickly, I wouldn't bet on that necessarily. I think that's going to be terribly difficult. The reason it's going to be very difficult is you have to remember three things. You have to understand that you need standards, okay, if you want to take a product global. And that's one of the reasons why 5G is so good. It's an open standard. It's one framework that the whole world has agreed on. And 2G, 3G, 4G, there were so many different competing technologies trying to become the global standard. But with 5G, we have one global standard. It took 10 years, David, right? It took 10 years. And that's fast tracking it. That's 10 years from concept in the standards to general availability of a product end to end by us and by our competitors. So now if you look at, okay, the US, let's suppose you can write the software in a year or 2 years or 3 years, you still need the second, which is interoperability testing. Telecom operators, the reason that telecom networks are so robust and don't fall over is because of interoperability testing. And that takes a very long time. And if you then think you're going to take a product that's just brand new and swap out 300 or 500,000 base stations in a year or 2 years or 3 years, usually a telecom operator is very conservative into a new product or a new company. They'll give a couple of % market share. So you can see there's a process that we go through in the telecom industry. It's not about saying, I'm going to give you an order for a million sites and I want you to swap them all out, please, with a brand new technology.
If I could add that follow-up to this question, Ericsson had a post on its blog a couple of days ago, which got a lot of attention, warning that the ORAN approach, the software-based approach, was much more easily hackable, inherently less secure than dedicated equipment. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yes, that's where I was about to lead to. When I mentioned the standardization component, we focused a lot in 5G, very specifically, to fix problems that were in 4G. That's why 5G is far more secure than 4G. If you now, and let's come down to this thing called why interoperability, and interoperability now, let's look at each of the different layers within an Open RAN type configuration, even if it got standardized. You suddenly have more areas where attack is possible. So you have more threat areas, and therefore you either need to defend against them or you need to, you need a robust architecture to fix those things. But who's responsible? Who's responsible for this box of multiple things in it, which comes from multiple players and maybe multiple boxes? Who's going to be responsible for end-to-end security? Who's going to be responsible for the power consumption? We've made these things, yes, very tightly coupled because we've been focusing on some very specific targets, which are capital cost, obviously, but operational efficiency and weight. If I have a look at the odd, there's only a couple of Open RAN products around in the market. They're not really anywhere close to a product that covers all spectrum and weighs 25 kilos and 800 megahertz wide and consumes the same power as a 4G solution. And it has 64 MIMO built into it. So I'm trying to demonstrate that the focus that the main vendors have had in trying to build this, yes, it is tightly coupled, but we consistently bring the capital cost down. The capital cost is not the problem for a telecom operator. It's 12% of a site. Power consumption is higher, site rental is higher, significantly higher, backhaul is higher, climbing the towers, sending people out there to build it is higher. So that's not the answer. Interoperability, standardization. you've just picked up on it. Security, terribly complicated.
If I could follow up on interoperability with another listener question. Listener notes that one of the problems with 5G is very limited range. You've got to build a base station on virtually every lamppost. I think China wants to install 6 million such base stations. In the meantime, as this is built out, are there applications of 5G which can flourish with some kind of hybrid 5G, 4G arrangement where you get occasional bursts of data, even though the base speed remains in the 4G range?
Okay, that's covering quite a couple of concepts, David. So first of all, the only reason that you need more base stations is because the first frequencies that we're using 5G in were the 3.5 to 3.5 to 4.5, this C-band area, and of course the millimeter wave, which is sitting up around 26 plus gigahertz. So based on physics, yes, you would need more of those to provide the same coverage. But let's step back a bit and remember when 4G came out, we put it in 2600 megahertz. It's a little bit lower than 3500, where 5G is. And the operators were starting to complain and say, I'm going to have to spend another 30% more because I need another 30% more sites than my 21 megahertz 3G. But within a year or so, maybe two, we took 4G software and concepts and we put them into 1800, 1900, 1700, 900, 700. So today, yes, we've started with 3500 because it's a new block of spectrum because it's very broad and operators could get 100 megahertz each and that provides huge amounts of benefit. But just around the corner, it'll be available in every single other frequency. Now, where do you get the benefits from? To answer your listener's question. So first of all, we do have a method where we use 5 and 4G. So we use 5G coming down at 3500 and we use 4G going back at 1800. And that gives a build, surprisingly, of almost exactly the same as 4G. So that means we don't need to spend a lot more money. But let's have a think about the reason we're building 5G. The first or second question you asked me, but it's all about supply and demand. If we have a growing market and there are more customers or they're consuming more data or they want to do more things or different things with this thing called 5G, then you're probably going to need to put these cells in different places or more of them. Let's take an example. I don't think it matters which country you're living in. I bet you get a dropped call on any major road. I bet you do. And now we're going to take a great use case, which is called a connected ambulance, where you're going to have, life critical things going on in an ambulance with, gigabits going to it and low latency. Oh, and I just got a dropped call. And that was on an A road. What about a B road or a C road? Well, don't we need to start building infrastructure in a different way? If you want to improve the GDP by 2.5% by connecting the traffic infrastructure, you need all the lampposts, you need all the lights, you need all the traffic lights, you need the stop signs, you need cameras looking at the roads to understand all of that stuff. You're naturally going to be building an architecture in a different way. And that's why I come back, first thing I said, 5G is a platform for transformation. It gives you the opportunity to start thinking differently. You have different spectrum available. You have a technology that can provide lower latency for certain applications. You can use it in different frequencies. You're not going to have massive MIMO perhaps down at 700 megahertz. The thing would be huge and cost a fortune and way too much. But the additional capacity that you can get of maybe 35, 40%, lots more connections, some MIMO-based capability provides huge advantages operationally and also for, take connected agriculture. You want to connect all the drones to fertilize and over hundreds or thousands of hectares, you're going to need different sort of architectural construction, if I may say. So today, you can use 4G and 5G together and get a lot of the benefits. So therefore, the applications that your colleague is asking for, if you piggyback 5G on top of 4G, wherever that footprint exists, you can provide a lot of those use cases that I mentioned. But if you want to transform a hospital, you need 5G in a hospital. If you want to transform a manufacturing plant, you need 5G in a manufacturing plant. You can't get around those things.
Right.
Well, I have a
yeah.
question from somewhat less technically demanding from one of our old friends and contributors to Asia Times, George Koo from the San Francisco Bay Area, who wants to know about the Harmony operating system and whether it has a chance against iOS and against Android.
All right. So I work specifically in the what we call the carrier business group, as opposed to, which is the guys who build the fixed and the mobile networks around the world, as opposed to the consumer business, which is the the guys that make these sort of great 5G handsets. Yeah. So the HarmonyOS, I think we had a developers conference just last week, in fact, and let's get right to the point. Do I think Harmony has a chance? I can recall quite a few years ago, but within my time in Huawei, when one of the telecom operators said, can you put a different operating system on a handset? Because they wanted to cultivate an ecosystem of applications based on that open operating system. So we said yes. So we tried it. It didn't work. The reason it didn't work was because of the investment, incentive, the program to stimulate applications to use that type of operating system. So it didn't sell more than about 500,000 units or something, if I remember correctly. I think it's different this time around. And I think the reason it's different is, first of all, we are doing this because obviously we have to, but we can see that if there is an opportunity to produce an alternative ecosystem, it should be good for the world. And the reason I say that is because two dominant operating systems, in fact, one very dominant operating system is not really, come back to competition and innovation. So we're doing things differently. First of all, we're doing it because we have a large installed base of products and we make darn good handsets, right? We make really good smartphones. And the world knows that. That's why we were number 2, right? In China, you have a large number of manufacturers of handsets. So it's possible and likely that perhaps others will pick up on this operating system, and perhaps even in other countries. Some countries have requested very specifically that they'd like an operating system. So I can see opportunities where, through the right type of collaboration, the right incentives, we can bring application developers to provide their applications to run natively on a Huawei operating system. So I believe that there's enough reason for this from a competitive perspective, as opposed to from a necessity perspective. But China's a big market. The number of installed base devices of Huawei and the others within China alone ought to give it the opportunity to be successful. So those 3 reasons, I think it'll be successful.
Paul, most listener questions divide into 2 groups. One is, how do you respond to charges that you're really a stalking horse for the Chinese Communist Party, which I don't expect you to answer. And the other is, how do you intend to work around U.S. technology restrictions, which again, I don't expect you to answer. We've raised those issues. If you want to talk about it, of course, we're very curious. But there is one question that you might want to say something about, which is the implications of the Nvidia ARM merger for the chip market, and whether it has any implications for Huawei that you'd like to tell us about. If you don't wish to comment, of course, I'll understand.
Yeah, I'll give you a personal opinion when I saw what was happening, and that's when I was listening back to the original owner of the company and some of the concepts. That framework, the design capability of ARM, in his opinion, was for the world, right, to be a platform so everybody would use it. So he was looking at the platform technology And I guess his concerns are that that this platform now belongs to a company that makes chips. So will they allow other people to have access to those design tools? And well, I think you've heard the CEO say that that he intends to do that and continue. So I don't know. I can only say what I read because I don't know in depth anything about the ARM company or even Nvidia, quite frankly. But the fact that there was only one, yes, in fact there probably isn't only one company. Perhaps they're the best and they're the best known. But that doesn't mean that other companies can't come along and try it and do it and succeed. You know, it's a bit like coming back to the HarmonyOS. Are we going to get 100% market share? No, but you know, you might only need 5 or 10%. If you have the opportunity and the capability to do those sorts of things. If I come back down to, you know, China and Huawei, it's not necessarily about efficiency. Remember, you know, we're here for the long term. It's not about we've got to do something desperately tomorrow. And the same thing with China. China can invest tens of billions of dollars, and it may take some time, and it'll develop a different way. And then you'll have more competition in these areas. But I can't tell you what Nvidia will do with ARM.
But Paul, a question here that I don't know where I read it in the FT, I think today. The issue of whether or not China, for example, will actually give a thumbs up to this this proposed merger, or you know, maybe we're not talking about China, maybe the British government, would they be doing that? You know, what's at issue there? You know, what does China have any leverage on this at all in this case?
Way out of my depth, I have no idea. You know, I'm a detail guy. If I know the answers, I'm an engineer. I don't speculate on, you know, what if and who might. You know. What I believe is that let's put all that bit aside. What I believe is that you know, I don't know whether ARM is the only tool available. It's for sure probably the best if everybody's been using it. But just, you know, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, right? What one man can invent, another man can discover. Okay. Let's come back to those sorts of things. You know, other people will develop them and build them. It will take time. But we keep coming back to the, you know, what you said, you know, this tech war, right? It's unfortunate that this is happening because, let's take the example we have right under our nose, COVID. If the reports are correct, 180 establishments trying to build a vaccine. Yep. We're trying to focus on the target. We're trying to fix things. We're trying to improve things. So the danger we have is that everything becomes isolated and fragmented. No, you can't have mine. I'm not going to share mine with you. And can't I see what you're doing? No, I'm not going to. Let's come back down to the premise of 5G. If you have 5G everywhere, if you interconnect everything, you collect the data, then you can start analyzing things. You need to consider security, you need to consider privacy, of course, but those are processes that we've discussed that you can fix, okay, you can work on. So the real danger is that you stifle progress. You stifle progress. That's the danger. And I believe countries, all of them, any of them, ought to be pragmatic enough to be thinking about that as the big picture, rather than trying to protect this or trying to protect that. Maybe I'm a visionary dreamer, but I believe it.
We have a whole slew of questions that are really sort of very much.
I'll do my best.
Well, you know, they're largely all in the sort of political arena, and you know, there's some questions about those issues. You know, I think that would probably be more questions that you would answer perhaps in your personal capacity than in your capacity as CTO at Huawei. But But I do have a kind of a personal question. I mean, you are stuck in the middle of this kind of political mess, right? There are people who are wholly convinced that the Chinese Communist Party is using Huawei as a tool to somehow subdue the world in whatever fashion this is imagined to be the case. Mm. And at the same time, you're an Australian national. You are actually right now between Australia and China. There isn't a whole lot of love lost, I suppose. So, how does it feel, Paul?
I would love to go and transform and fix lots of the problems that we have. I can still remember when we were trying to do the national broadband network in Australia, yes, and Huawei was locked or blocked out of that. And I can remember, if I'm not mistaken, it was going to cost about 40 plus billion dollars. Yes, if you'd been using a Huawei technology, there's no way it was going to cost that. So we would have saved taxpayers' money. But here's a personal answer that I can give you. My mum hasn't been able to get her home telephone working for several weeks. She's a very old pensioner, yes, and has no other means of communication. Just want to put that little framework out there that, sometimes we do some things for political reasons that are not really in the best interests of everybody. Sorry if I said that on camera and I shouldn't have, but so I believe that there's a lot of things we could do, but there's a lot of misinformation. And if, this guy here, he's not Chinese, and I worked for this company for a very long time, what I can tell you is that everything the company has said and done, that's exactly what they've said and that's what they've done. All right? I also sit on an advisory committee, part of our software transformation. And I've gone on record before. I sit in there, all the R&D people know me. I see the software. Okay, I don't read every single line, but I don't need to read every single line. We have lots of tools. I don't see any backdoors. I don't see malicious things. I see some architectural things that could have been done better because we were hasty in trying to get products out quickly, because that's what customers wanted. And because we're inventing things this way and we're doing things in a different way compared with the best software architecture perhaps in the world. But over this last couple of years, whilst looking at this program and inviting senior experts in to have a look at what we've been doing and the comments they make, and some of the comments they are like this: some of your techniques that you've been using and you're able to produce products as good as this. So second one, some of your software skills are so good, you should go into the arena and demonstrate them. You should be promoting your capabilities. So, we do things in a different way. Because we do things a different way, people think it's not possible that you could achieve those results. We do them in a different way. Come and have a talk with me. Come and have a chat, and I'll discuss all those things, as we've had many chats, yes? So I find it very unfortunate that, and it's unfortunate that it's a lot of the Western countries that are saying, no, don't come here, don't talk about that. When I'm ready, I'll tell you what I want. But but when I travel around all the developing countries, I get presidents, prime ministers who say, Paul, my country needs help. We trust you, we trust Huawei. Will you come and help transform my economy? Because I need help. And I think that's what, if you come back to the DNA of Huawei, if you look at our vision, our mission, our core values, what Mr. Ren has tried to do and build up a company from, a couple of $1,000 over 31 years, 32 years, 33 years, I think now. I think it's a remarkable achievement. So you don't need to fear Huawei. There's plenty of room for competition. Come and collaborate with us. Let's transform the world.
Paul, since you've made such an eloquent pitch for your company, I would like to make a pitch for ours, for Asia Times, with the indulgence of our readers. Like all newspapers, we live by subscriptions. We have, as most of you probably have noticed, put in a paywall several weeks ago. We've had a steady increase in subscriptions, but we really require you to subscribe to make quality journalism possible and events like this possible. in the future, these will be events for subscribers, but as a way of communicating with you, we've done this as a free public event, as a public service, with the much appreciated support of Paul Scanlan. So please subscribe early and often. 2 subscriptions are better than 1. And we're grateful for your time. I think there's time for 1 or 2 listener questions still. We have a couple minutes left. One is, do you see a potential for a bifurcation of global ITC standards? One for the West or the Anglosphere, and another for China and other countries that might align with it, like different gauges of railway track between Europe and the USSR?
No, I don't. No, I feel quite strongly about that. No, I don't. And the reason I say that is a little bit of common sense, but also there are so many different standards groups, and we've got lots of geeks in all these places, right? They're all festering around to try and figure out how to do things the best way. So, no, I don't think that's going to happen. I think this, this period that we're in at the moment, I'm always optimistic. It'll get better. I believe there will be more collaboration. I think, currently the US has been involved in the standards development. The companies over there have been involved in it. And I think, as we move forward towards more AI-based solutions, that the US will again demonstrate its capability, its leadership in these areas. And it will want to come back in, because without standardization and without a lot of the capability that China has, and a lot of the developing world has, they want to leapfrog the problems that the West has, the legacy issues. So those couple of components give me confidence that we won't have this type of separation between East and West in standards.
Oh, there's one other question briefly. I'm abbreviating the content of the question and just simply ask you, who will win this war? I mean, we are engaged in this technology war, as people have chosen to call it.
Yeah.
The situation right now is, well, whatever, your answers today, I think, give us a sort of a sense of the lay of the land. But where does this go? Is there a winner, or is this going to be just a lose-lose, or what kind of situation are we talking about?
In the short term, there's no doubt that the industry will suffer. Yes, you can see that already, just in availability of certain components and things. Just take the supply chain part. Yes, so let's talk about the ability to bring certain technologies to market. You'll see that there will be some delay, some slowdown in that area. But in the medium term, I think it will turn around and it'll get a lot better. So I think everybody will win. And the reason for that I come back to is, I just give you a very practical example. I would have expected, the US to turn around and say, wow, this is great equipment from Huawei. You know what we do in the US better than everybody else is we know how to deploy that stuff, and we know how to collect the data, and we know how to analyze it with our AIs, because we're better than everybody else in AI, the Googles and the Amazons, etc. And we're going to transform all industries. So there's the target, Uwe, yes? So if I come back to that, then, you can see already, Agitply is already releasing more spectrum. They're being able to see that more spectrum. They have the opportunity to start applying transformative things. You've seen operators in Europe now working with industry partners in depth to try to transform some of the industry. So the DNA of the telecom operators is starting to change. And now the COVID has demonstrated also the value of spectrum to be given away rather than sit in your pockets. You see that in the US, you see that in Europe and in other countries. So these combinations, I believe, yes, in the short term, there will be a slowdown. But in the medium term, it will pick up, and I believe it'll get even better. And I think it's because of COVID, because of the behavioral changes. It's been demonstrated that, we can do things in different ways. And I think that bit of common sense, linked with business sense, will prevail in the medium term. once we get over this tiff.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you very
yeah, this is this has been great, and I think I would like to thank everybody who attended this session. Of course, David, thanks a lot for not only pitching in, but you know, driving some of the more difficult questions forward. It's in Hong Kong 11:15 p.m. and we are at the end of the story. So, David, any sort of last thoughts here?
No, I think we've covered it. Uwe, thank you. Paul, again, a deep appreciation from Asia Times and our readers for taking the time to talk with us.
Okay, everybody, that's it. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.